Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. Our story begins with a chase between the police and a white SUV being pursued by a gang of Asians, and an exchange of gunfire occurs between them. Meanwhile, a child comes to wake Hancock up and tells him that a Sado operation is happening, and since he's supposed to be a superhero, he should take care of it. But Hancock responds with indifference, causing the child to feel bored and leave him. After that, Hancock decides to get up and go solve the problem. He flies quickly through the air, approaches the back of the car and enters to sit with them, calmly telling them instead of causing a problem, they should surrender to the police, but they refuse and start shooting. The problem is that the bullets return to them. At that moment, Hancock feels annoyed and stomps his foot on the ground, using it as a brake pedal. After stopping the car, he's very upset, perhaps because his sunglasses got broken. He takes the entire car and hangs it on top of a skyscraper. In reality, television doesn't seem happy about what happened, as the losses and destruction might be much more than what the thieves initially stole. We see this on television in a bar where Hancock is sitting, as a girl enters, very impressed with him, and tells him he saved the life of someone she knows. But in reality, she's amazed by him because he's a superhero and attractive to her. He takes her in his car and goes to his house, where she's impressed by everything he has, even if she wasn't impressed. And they continue to get closer until a relationship occurs between them. But it's not an ordinary relationship at all, because for a superhero, it has to be extraordinary too. In reality, she feels like she's losing her soul, so she tells him she's going to the bathroom. At that moment, he feels happy because she got close to him, and he goes to find her having taken his car and fled. Or for her, she escaped with her soul intact. After that, we go to a company where Ray has held a meeting and is trying to explain to the heads of big companies a project he wants to implement, which involves creating something related to peace and being a mark on all free products and things that benefit and help humans develop, but for free, which of course is not suitable for company heads who are looking for money, so they simply reject the idea, and he leaves the headquarters in a state of frustration. On his way back in his car, there's a traffic jam, but in reality, it's not in an ordinary place. It's on the train tracks right in front of the train, and indeed, the train will be coming towards him, and he's unable to reverse or move forward because all the cars are blocking the way. At that moment, Hancock decides to do something very strange, lifting Ray's car and flipping it onto the car in front of it, causing them to collide, and waits for the train to collide with them, then comes out unharmed. The problem now is that he destroyed 2 cars and the entire train to save one person's life. Of course, everyone attacked him and shouted that he could have simply lifted the car and flown it up until the train passed, then put it down again. In reality, he had come to them drunk, unaware, and unable to speak. Amid the people's quarrel with him, Ray enters to defend him, because in the end, he saved his life and allowed him to return home safely to his family. He thanks him and asks him to take him in his car to his house, and indeed, he flies the car and takes him to his house. There, Ray meets his son, who loves Hancock very much, and therefore invites him to lunch at his house. But at the same time, Ray's wife is upset with Hancock's presence, because according to all the news, he's a bad person, but she has to accept him. During the meal, we learn that Ray's son has a problem with another bully child in the class, and they want him to solve the problem politely and diplomatically, but at the same time, Hancock wants to solve the problem with a fight and to hit him. And the biggest opponent of the idea of hitting is the mother, because she sees that Michael, or the bully child, is going through a tough time because his parents are separating, so we shouldn't deal with him this way. Then the lunch ends, and Hancock leaves, with Ray following him and telling him that he's ready to help him become a superhero loved by people instead of everyone hating him, and he needs to rearrange his steps. Instead of descending and destroying the place, he should descend calmly and try to care more about people, and he gives him his card, after which Hancock flies. The next day, after thinking, Hancock returns to Ray, and there, before entering the house, he meets Michael, the bully child, who starts cursing Hancock, so Hancock simply picks him up and throws him far away, making the child fall, start crying, and run to his house. At that moment, Ray comes out and tells Hancock that what he did was wrong, and he shouldn't do that under any circumstances. They take him into the house, learn about his project, and try to explain his problem to Hancock. He opens YouTube to show him Hancock's most famous clips, the first being when he went in burnt clothes and with his backside exposed to an ice cream shop, pushing all the kids to take the ice cream. And in another instance, there was a whale that came out of the sea against its will, and Hancock flies in, aiming it back into the water, but in reality, he aims it at a boat that breaks and sinks Hancock himself. He tells him he didn't remember the matter, but in reality, that was the problem. Additionally, one of Ray's ideas is to make him attractive clothes like superhero outfits, even though Hancock is annoyed by that and sees those clothes as tight and unsuitable for men. Then Ray's wife, I don't remember her name, let's call her Susan because I don't rely on names, Susan turns on the TV to the news, and the anchor is talking about Hancock because he seems like a selfish and self-loving person, not enforcing the law, considering himself above the Constitution. From here, Ray asks Hancock to turn himself in, promising him that after just 2 weeks, they will ask for his help. The idea is just to start doing good. Indeed, a press conference happens, and Hancock says in it that he decided to submit to the government and turn himself in. Yes, people criticize him, but he leaves them and goes to prison. In reality, he's not completely imprisoned because he can leave at any time and destroy the entire place. But he's there by choice. The first time he enters the hall among the prisoners, they're very upset with him because more than half of them were put there by him. He tells them calmly, "Avoid problems or there will be a problem." Of course, no one avoids it, and the problem happened. Things got mixed up, and it shouldn't have happened. A day later, Ray visits Hancock in prison, surprised by what he did. But Hancock tells him the court sentenced him to about 8 years in prison, with 4 remaining after reduction. At that moment, Hancock felt very upset and simply headed towards the door that locked him and broke it to get out. But Ray stopped him, saying, "What you're doing is wrong. The most important thing for you is people's love. It would be better for you to live among them rather than live alone." So he decided to return and continue. He was put into a therapy group, likely due to drinking alcohol, and saw other prisoners going through the same problems, but he didn't speak, just watched and spent the following days between attending support groups, learning from Ray how to become a good person loved by people, and playing basketball in a special way. After days, Susan visited him with her son to bring him pasta with meat, and she easily told him not to flirt with Ray because he's a good man, then left. Days passed until the day when the police chief called Hancock in prison and asked for his help because there was a gunman attacking a bank or company headquarters, and they needed support. Hancock wore the outfit Ray made for him and headed there, where there was a wounded policewoman under a car, and his first mission was to save her without getting hurt. He completed the mission, then the police chief asked him to finish the matter, so he entered the place where the hostages and the gang were and eliminated them one by one without them noticing until only one was left, who told him he had placed bombs on all the hostages' clothes, and the remote was in his hand, and that his hand would not let go of the remote. So simply, Hancock cut off his hand with the remote and handed it to the police chief. And at that moment, everyone was very happy with Hancock and started applauding him, and he suddenly became a hero, meaning the plan succeeded. That same night, Ray went out with Susan and Hancock. They spent an evening and dinner together, and there were fans of Hancock taking photos with him. Then they returned for dinner. Ray asked Hancock about why he turned into a drowning person, or what happened, or how it happened. In reality, Hancock didn't remember much because he suffers from some kind of memory loss. All he remembers is that he was in the hospital with some minor injuries and a hole in his brain and a set of wounds. But exactly an hour later, all his wounds had healed, but he had no information about his identity or why he was there. In reality, that incident was 80 years ago, but Hancock doesn't age. At that moment, we saw Susan crying, and we were surprised by her intense emotion. After drinking a lot, the three went to Ray's house because he was drunk. So Hancock threw him on the bed and went out to find Susan washing the dishes. And there was a strange closeness between them that they didn't understand the reason for, to the point where they kissed each other. But Susan suddenly pushed him, breaking the wall, and we learned then that Susan was also super like Hancock. She told Hancock, "Don't interfere with him, and don't come back here again. Enough of what you've done." Hancock was confused and didn't know exactly what he did, but most likely this happened in the past before he lost his memory. The next day, in front of Ray, who was puzzled by the hole in the wall, Susan told him that Hancock sneezed and broke the wall. Then Hancock entered them and wanted to talk to Susan in any way to understand what was happening. They agreed that she would come to him in the place where he lives, then she went there. At the same time, the person whose hand was cut off from the gang that was caught in the robbery operation had entered prison and sat with prisoners who had a big problem with Hancock, and they agreed that they would escape to take revenge on him. At the same time, Susan went to Hancock in his house, and he began asking her why they were here or what the story was. He learned from them that they are considered a couple, and they have been here for thousands of years, and they are the last two of their kind, but they cannot stay next to each other. He was very surprised and didn't understand the reason, and she couldn't explain it to him. When Hancock felt she was hiding something from him, he told her he could go to Ray to know everything. So Hancock indeed flew to the place where Ray was to explain to him what was happening and expose Susan in front of him. But Susan flew after him, and a big fight happened between them that destroyed the city, to the point where the sky started to snow. At the same time, Ray was with a company that had sat him down to learn more about Hancock and deal with him in a promotional way, but he was trying to promote his non-profit charitable project. At the same time, the place they were in was being destroyed, and when Ray approached the window, he saw Hancock sitting with Susan and quarreling, and he understood that there was something strange. Before he returned home, he saw Susan flying, and he didn't understand what was happening, and this is her husband who told her years ago. At the same time, Hancock came to tell him the same thing, so both of them were waiting for Susan's explanation, who told them they are the last of their kind, and in reality, Hancock is also considered a part, but they cannot get close to each other. She left the house and went out because the matter became difficult even for Ray. At that moment, Hancock returned to his slight depression and went to the supermarket to buy alcohol as usual, and there was a robbery happening in the place, and the shop owner indirectly asked for help from Hancock. Hancock dealt with the gang with one of them, who was threatening him with a gun, and of course this was something ordinary and harmless for him, as Hancock fought with a bag of sweets and broke the wall with it. But in return, one of the gang members shot him with 2 bullets, and strangely, he was injured and bled, and he was taken to the hospital. It was very strange, and the news appeared and everyone talked about it. When Ray found out, he took his son and went to the hospital. At the same time, Susan went to the hospital to explain to him the rest of the details about why they shouldn't get close to each other, and why all the couples of their kind died. In reality, the closer they get, they lose their power and return to a normal form to live their lives and die. But if they stay away from each other, their strength and ability to live for thousands of years increase. He also learned that the accident that happened 80 years ago, in which he lost his memory, wasn't the first accident, but there were similar events that happened repeatedly, causing his suffering. He learned here that Susan, to love him, was running away from him, to discover that the further they are from each other, the stronger they will be. But at the same time, they cannot continue far from each other, as there is something physical that brings them together. Hancock, against his will, goes to the place where Susan is without even knowing her. At the same time, the gang comes to take revenge on Hancock. The first thing they do is shoot Susan, and in reality, she also gets injured. As we agreed, as long as they are close to each other, they can be easily endangered. He still has some superpower, but he doesn't have the ability to protect himself. He begins to overcome one member after another until the last person. He starts shooting him with several bullets, and with each bullet, Susan loses a part of her soul until her breath completely stops. But at the moment of losing hope, he runs and hits the last member of the gang and cuts off his other hand. Hancock is about to die, as is Susan, but suddenly, Hancock regains his last breath. He doesn't know what to do if he wants to save Susan now, so the simple solution is to stay away from her and not get close to her. He jumps out of the window at his weakest and starts taking steps in high leaps, and with each leap, a pulse returns to Susan's heart until Hancock can completely escape, and Susan's soul returns as well. A month later, we see Susan with her husband Ray and their son sitting and talking. He asks her about things in history from thousands of years that she witnessed, asking her about figures like Elizabeth and John Kennedy and many things she witnessed, and she wasn't like that. At that time, he receives a call from Hancock, who is in another place, but his brave act makes him intervene, drawing the charity project logo he wanted to do, which is considered an unprecedented success. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button to get more new videos. See ya!